Welcome back to another edition of the Saturday to Sunday Football Podcast. I am Paul Perdichizzi, and thank you for joining me as always. Day one of the NFL Combine is in the books. So much to break down. Thanks for joining us on this instant night one recap show of the NFL Combine. Defensive linemen broken into two groups. You had mostly the DTs in group one. You had the edge players in group two. Then you had the linebackers in group three tonight. Some explosive 40 times, a lot to break down. Going to share my instant reactions for what I saw on day one of the NFL Combine. Let's start off with the first D-line group, which was mostly made up of the big guys, the big defensive tackles, and talk about some players that stood out, talk about some guys that maybe improved their stock a little bit, because I think there was a lot to be impressed with from not only DL line group one, which is the DTs, the edge group, which was DL group two, and then obviously the linebackers who rounded out the coverage tonight. So if we start with the guy who was the most impressive in the first group, it was easily Brenton Fiske out of Florida State. He ran a 4.78 40-yard dash time. That ended up being the official. He had a 1.68 10-yard split. He had fantastic. He had good jumps. He had good 20-yard shuttle. He had good cone. Really impressive performance from Fiske. 20-yard shuttle was 4.37 on for Fiske. He really has helped himself. He had a really good Senior Bowl week, and now he is continued that I think now you're going to start to see him definitively in people's top 50 big boards. I think you're going to see him now locked into 2-round mock drafts. I think when the day started, he still was looked at as more of a day 2 prospect, and he was going to go somewhere on day 2. But I thought it could have been round 3. Now this momentum is building. I think you're talking about a guy who now is probably squarely in the mix to go somewhere in the top 50. I think round 2, he's coming off the board. His athleticism, his explosiveness, the way he performed at the Senior Bowl in terms of winning one-on-one matchups. Really impressive performance from him in the first day here of the NFL Combine. Another guy who I thought stood out, and he's going to go round 1, and that's Brian Murphy II out of Texas, checking in at 6 feet, 297 pounds. He ran a 4.87 40-yard dash time. This is talking about a guy who's almost 300 pounds, and he ran a 4.87 40-yard dash time. He had a 33-inch vertical jump. He had a 9.3 on the broad jump. He looked great in the on-field work as well. So a really impressive performance, kind of solidify his position as one of the first defensive tackles, if not the first defensive tackle taken in this draft, and one of the best defensive players in this entire draft as well. Some other guys who I thought stood out from that first group, really impressive performance from Ruke Orhoro out of Clemson. He checked in at 6'4", 294. He ran a 4.89 40-yard dash time was the official. He had a 32-inch vert and a 9.8 broad jump. He looked good in the on-field work as well. He's more of a day 3 prospect, but you put this type of performance out there, and I think you could start to see guys, listen, day 3 is a big range, right? We have round 4 to round 7. You put a performance like this, you're coming from Clemson, you're talking about a guy who could climb now, and maybe he could sneak into the end of the top 100. But if not, I think you're talking about a guy now who's got enough intrigue with that athleticism at his size, at his frame, the college he came from. I think you're talking about a guy who pushes his way now into the early day 3 mix with the performance we saw from him tonight. Maikai Wingo out of LSU. He checked in at 6 feet or so, 284. He ran a 4.85 40-yard dash time. Didn't even run the second time. He was happy with that one. I mean, another guy, 85 pounds. Really impressive. He had a 31.5 on the vertical jump and a 9.1 on the broad jump. I don't think we realize the numbers that these guys are putting up at their size and frame are just staggering. I thought Wingo looked really quick and explosive in the on-field drills as well. So he's a guy who I think is going to see his stock rise a little bit. And I think he's a guy that people are going to be more intrigued with and hasn't gotten a lot of attention. He's an intriguing day 3 depth tackle, defensive tackle. But I think now the athleticism, he's going to have some upside traits. So I think you're going to see him raise his stock a little bit. Chris Jenkins, obviously, he's a guy well known on that Michigan defense that led them to a national championship. He checked in about 6'2", almost 6'3", 299 pounds. He ran a 4.91. So we're talking about a guy at 299 pounds who ran a 4.91. He had a 30-inch on the vert and a 9.7 on the broad. Another guy who I think has solidified himself, locked him in probably somewhere on round 2, mid to late round 2. But he's a guy who I thought looked good in the on-field workout as well. Logan Lee out of Iowa. He's 6'5", 281. I think he's more 5-tech, defensive end, kick inside on sub packages, and rush from inside. But he put together a really complete athletic package. He's a guy who he ran a 5.05. But I mean, if you look at some of the other athletic testing, he had a 31.5 on the vert. He had a 9.6 on the broad. And then his 20-yard shuttle time was 4.37. Far and away one of the best there. One other person at 4.37. No one else after that was even in the 4.4s or the 4.5s. You have to go all the way to 4.66. And then he also had a 7.16 on the pre-cone, which was the best of the big guys. Now only 7 or 8 of them ran, but you combine that, the historical data, it was a really impressive performance from Logan Lee, who, like I said, I think at his size and at his frame, we're probably talking about a guy who's going to end up kicking inside on sub packages and rush from the interior, but a guy who could maybe be a 5-tech defensive end. So I had like a late day 3 grade on him, but I think the complete athletic package here makes him a really intriguing player that will see his stock increase from this, because he's got the length that teams I look for, especially in those 5-tech defensive ends. And now some of this untapped athleticism that he tested out here, I think you're going to see him, I think, move up a little bit in terms of people's ranks. But those were the main guys, I think, from the first DL group that I thought stood out. I think the most impressive by far was Murphy and Fiske, but I did like what a couple of the other guys did there as well. If we take this to the second DL group, which was our edge defenders. Now, I put a tweet out about this as well. I don't think we really understand just how freakish so many of these edge defenders are. They are running times that are faster than running backs, some running backs, many running backs, and some wide receivers. And they are doing it in body types that are 20, 30, 40, 50, or 60 pounds greater than some of these running backs and wide receivers who we're going to see run on Saturday. Like, it's just outstanding. If you wonder why teams look for athleticism for offensive linemen, it's because there has never been a time in the NFL that there's more athleticism on the defensive side of the ball in terms of the pass rushers who are trying to get after the quarterback. And I think today was the perfect example. When we look at this list, the story needs to start with, but not end with, because there's so many impressive performances, but the story has to start with Chop Robinson. 6'3" or so, 254 pounds. He ran a 4.48 official 40-yard dash time. 6'3", 254. You realize that 4.49 is going to beat 60% of the running backs, 70% of the running backs? And what are most running backs going to check in at? Somewhere between 190 and 210 pounds, most of them? 190 to 210? So we're talking about a guy who is going to be, give or take, 50 pounds more than most running backs who are going to run on Saturday on average. And he ran a faster 40-yard dash time than that. So it's a tremendous performance. There were so many comps in terms of this, the athletic ability of Chop Robinson compared to Micah Parsons. I totally understand why. He had a 34.5 on the vert. He had a 10.8 on the broad jump. He had a 4.25 20-yard shuttle as well. He looked really smooth in the on-field drills as well. So Chop Robinson was coming there. We knew he was going to test out well. I think he even exceeded expectations, which were already high for how impressive he was going to be. Really impressive performance from Chop Robinson. I think you see if he was more on that late round one, I think you see him move up a little bit now just based on these numbers and just how much of an athletic freak he is. Next up guy you got to talk about, and he's one of the top defenders in the entire class, and that's Jared Verse out of Florida State. A lot of people thought he was going to come out last year. Stayed at Florida State for another year. He's almost 6'4", 254. He ran a 4.58. 4.58 at 254 pounds. He had a 35-inch vert, 10.7 broad, 4.44 on the 20-yard shuttle, 7.31 on the pre-cone. One of the top edge defenders in this class. Looked really good in the on-field drills as well. But Chop Robinson and Jared Verse, I think, were the two guys that stood out the most. But they also came into the day as two of the more highly regarded edge prospects in this class. Some other guy and one other guy, I'll group him in there too, who also came in obviously very highly regarded as one of the top guys is Latu out of UCLA. Now, there were some, we knew he's a very, very skilled pass rusher. Very impressive. Got an arsenal of techniques to get after the quarterback, has a good pass rush plan. But he needed to come here and test out and just check boxes, and he did that. First off, he came in at almost 6'5", 259 pounds. He ran a 4.6440. I think people were more worried that he was going to be like 4.78, up there. So he runs a 4.64. So that checked off that box, and he's got the athletic package there. On top of that, he also had a 32-inch vert and a 9.8 broad jump. So that athletic package, with how skilled he is of a pass rusher, Latu is locked in somewhere mid-round one, I would think. Somewhere between 10 and 20. You probably see him come off the board now. So I think Latu, Chop Robinson, Jared Verse were the three biggest names that kind of checked off boxes and even outperformed athletic expectations that we expected from them. Some other guys that I thought really maybe won the day in terms of getting more notoriety. The first one was Jalex Hunt. Jalex Hunt out of Houston Christian, 6'4", 252. He ran a 4.64 40-yard dash, 37.5 vert, and a 10.8 broad. Looked really quick, really explosive in the on-field drills. I thought Jalex Hunt was a guy who he had some intriguing traits to him, but I think now this takes his intrigue based on just how well he tested as a developmental pass rushing edge from a small school. But now this level of athleticism is going to intrigue teams. So when you get to the fourth round and you're looking for that guy, I think he's going to be a guy now, because I do think there's a little bit of a drop-off with how many underclassmen went back to school with the NIL money and the transfer portal. I think Hunt becomes a really interesting guy now somewhere in that early day 3 range, with the performance he put here at the Combine. Another guy I want to talk about is Cedric Johnson, the edge out of Mississippi. He's another guy that's looked at as a day 3 type of prospect. I thought he performed really well. 6'3", 260. He ran a 4.63 at 260 pounds. He had a 38-inch vertical jump and a 10.2 broad jump. So really great athletic package that Cedric Johnson put out there today in terms of his athletic testing. Muhammad Kamara is another guy out of Colorado State, 6'1", 248. He had a 4.57 official yard 40 time. He had a 34.5 vert and a 10.7 broad jump. I thought his complete athletic package really impressive as well. So I thought Kamara out of Colorado State. I thought Hunt at a Houston Christian really helped themselves a lot. Cedric Johnson, like I talked about. Xavier Thomas, obviously from a bigger school, Clemson, 4.6240. He looked really smooth in the drills. Braylon Trice out of Washington, he ran a 4.72 at 6'3", 245. And I can go up and down this list. Eric Watts out of Connecticut, 4.67 at 254 pounds. So many guys really shined in this group that I thought, we can keep going on about how many guys. The one guy who I will say I thought underwhelmed slightly for what I expected was Darius Robinson out of Missouri. Now, his official 40 time was 4.95. Now, listen, he's coming in at 285, 6'5", 285. But I think this type of athletic testing is going to have some teams questioning whether or not he could be a traditional defensive end or he's got to be more of a power stop, which he is. He's a power player. But I think this might mitigate him a little bit more inside. And for a guy who's got a round 1, round 2 grade, I was looking at him as more of a guy who could be a traditional defensive end, but then kick inside in sub packages. I think some teams will be turned off a little bit by that testing time because they want their edge rushers from the outside to have more juice, to have more speed, to more have explosiveness. And Robinson didn't show that. Now, his complete package is still a very intriguing player. He's got great length, great production, great play strength, great power. So maybe he finds a home as a power 5-tech, set the edge defensive end who also gets after the quarterbacks. And maybe when he kicks inside and he's matched up with, interior offensive linemen, that's where we're going to see some more, production in terms of the counting stats, the rushes, the pressures, the sacks, passes defend, batted down and stuff like that. But I thought that 40-yard dash time might have hurt him a little bit in terms of the way he was perceived. If we take this now to the linebackers, now the linebacker group wasn't looked at as a very strong group in this class, but I came away really impressed. Now, a couple things we got to start with. First off, Dallas Turner was running in the wrong group. I don't understand why they can't figure out how to get guys lined up in the right spot. But Dallas Turner should have been running with the edge group. But he was running with the linebacker group, and it is what it is. But I will say, we talked about Chop Robinson. We talked about Brandon Fisk. Performance today was as impressive a performance as you're going to find anywhere. Because when you understand, he's 6'2", 6'3", 247. So he's 247 pounds. He ran a 4.46 40-yard dash time. If running backs run that, they're going to be fantastic. Many wide receivers won't hit that, like I said before. And he did it at 247. But that's not where it ended. That's really just where it started. He had a 40.5 vertical jump and a 10.7 broad jump. Smooth, fluid, explosive, can bend the edge, can bend off the edge. Great first step. It's hard to envision a scenario where he's not the first edge off the board now. And it's hard to see a scenario where he might not be the first defensive player off the board. So I think there were some question marks about Dallas Turner's ceiling and upside recently. You weren't seeing him in a ton of top 10s. He wasn't always the first defensive player off the board. I think that's going to change now with how impressive a performance this was at the Combine. And we expect him to do well, but I don't know if anybody thought he was going to do this well. The other guy that I thought really shined, and if the medicals check out, I don't think he's going to get past the top 50 picks, is the more traditional linebacker, and that's Peyton Willis out of NC State. 6'4", 233. He ran a 4.43 official 40 time. He had a 34.5 vert, a 9.11 broad jump. He looked smooth. He looked fluid. He looked quick. His film is great. Wilson is a guy who can anchor a linebacker unit for years to come. And I thought he checked off everything. If he checks out medically, I think he might have a real shot at being a top 50 pick. Some under the radar guys, I thought Jordan McGee at a Temple performed well. He had a 4.55 40-yard dash time. 35.5 vert, 10.4 broad. I thought he looked good in the on-field drills as well. So he's an interesting day 3 linebacker prospect that I thought looked good. A guy on that 1-2 border, Edrin Cooper out of Texas A&M. He ran a 4.51, looked really good in the drills. Another guy, explosive, 34.5, 9.10 on the jumps. So those were the 4 linebackers that really shined today. Turner, Wilson, McGee, and Edrin Cooper. If we're looking for maybe another under-the-radar guy that I thought maybe had a better day today than maybe what we expected, I think I did that at Curtis Jacobs out of Penn State. I mean, all these Penn State guys, year after year, just test out fantastic. 6'1", 241. He had a 4.58 40-yard dash time. These Penn State guys, I don't know, they're always some of the most impressive athletic testers. So I thought he outperformed maybe expectations. I thought McGee had a nice showing today as a day 3 type linebacker. I think Wilson and Cooper solidified themselves as 2 of the top off-the-ball linebackers in the class. And I think Dallas Turner solidified himself as defensive player 1 and edge 1 in this entire draft class. First time they've ever had the D-line and the linebackers kick off the combine. I thought it was interesting because these are some of the most physical freaks that we have in the combine. Tomorrow will be the DBs and the tight ends, which is a really interesting day. That's the first time they've ever been grouped together. So we should see some really freakish numbers from some of the tight ends. Obviously, the safeties and the corners always put on a show. Some really athletic corners, some really athletic safeties. So tomorrow we should have a lot of really strong 40 times, a lot of explosive jumps, a lot of explosiveness tomorrow. I will say overall, and I tweeted about this as well, I think it was maybe as bad a combine coverage as I ever could remember. And I've been watching the combine for decades. And I've been doing Saturday, Sunday now for 7 or 8 years, whatever it is. I can't remember as poor coverage in terms of showing the audience. The truth of the matter is, and we talk about this all the time, even with the Senior Bowl. I don't know. I think they're misunderstanding who's watching the combine. Just like they're misunderstanding who's watching the Senior Bowl practices. They make the show as if it's for a casual fan. I hate to break it to them. I know a lot of people who are football fans. None of them are interested in the combine if they're casual fans. They like watching football on Sunday. They play in a couple fantasy football leagues. But they're not obsessed with it. They're not obsessed with the NFL draft. They'll know some players in the draft. The people who are watching the combine start to finish are the diehards. The people who are in double-digit fantasy leagues, the people who are in excessive amounts of dynasty leagues, the people that look at NFL draft, mock drafts, and rankings and watch film year-round. Those are the people who do analytics stuff year-round. Those are the people who are watching the combine. Why is it that we had so little coverage? I don't understand why they can't show us more of the jumps. They don't have to show us the jumps in real time. But why can't they take 5 minutes and like they do when they come back from commercial and they show the combine, the 40 times that they missed? Why can't they run through and show the vertical jumps and the broad jumps of these guys? Why do we need to take commercial breaks during the 40-yard dashes when we're going to have so much downtime later? There was a 70-minute stretch tonight where they showed nothing. They didn't show a single on-field drill when the edge rushers in D-line group 2 were doing their conversion drills all the way until the linebackers went. It was 70 minutes of them filling dead time with just talking about prospects that already had performed and not showing the stuff that was actually going on at the combine. And then they get to the 40s and they have to take like 4 commercial breaks during the 40-yard dashes where they could easily strategically work it out that they should be able to show the combines, they should be able to show the 40-yard dash times uninterrupted. And they could show more of the other stuff. They could show the jumps. I think the people who are watching the combine are interested by the jumps, especially for the guys who you know are going to test well. I know they show us some of them, but they show very few of the jumps. And I think the people who are watching this stuff would be intrigued to see more of that. So that's my one complaint. I won't talk about it again on any more of the recap shows. But I do hope the coverage is a little bit better over the next couple of days, because the people who want to watch this are invested. And we don't want to see so much dead time talking about the top prospects. Most of the people watching the combine know who the top prospects are. And yeah, you can be talked about for a little bit, but we also don't need to talk about prospects that it's not even their day. We don't need to talk about the quarterbacks and stuff like that. That's Saturday. Focus on the guys who are performing today and show as much of the drills as possible. I think that's what people want to watch. But if for whatever reason they try to make it more of a show to kind of cater to the casual fan, I just don't think the casual fan is watching the NFL Combine. So that's my one gripe about the Combine. I still love it. I still think it matters. I still think the guys we talked about today, a lot of them are winners. Some of them might have moved up 5 spots, 10 spots in round 1. Other guys might have moved up a round. I do think it matters. And again, this is just the stuff that we see. There's so much behind the scenes that even matters more. But it's fun for what it is. For some people, it's their introduction to these prospects, which is a great way to get started. You hear Daniel Jeremiah does a great job. Talk about these guys. You learn a lot about who the top guys are. So for some people, it's an introduction. For other people, it sends them back who really do this year round. It sends them back to the film to do cross checks. It's fun to see their complete athletic package. So day 1 in the books. Looking forward to tomorrow, the DBs and the tight ends. Then the fantasy goal day 3 with the wide receivers, running backs, and quarterbacks. And then rounding out with the big guys, the offensive linemen on Sunday. I will continue to do these short recap instant reaction pods each day. Hopefully you're enjoying these. I am live tweeting during every single 40 run, sharing my thoughts on the player, how they win, a draft projection. When they run their second 40, I tweet that out. I talk about what I see with the jumps or the on-field drills. Nonstop on Twitter from the minute it starts till the minute it ends. Feel free to reach out to me, ask me questions, ask my thoughts on guys, whether it's for your NFL team, general evaluation thoughts on the player, fantasy aspect of something. I love the interaction. I love the engagement. So hopefully there's a lot more of that over the next couple of days. So if you're enjoying this, please get over to the website, SS Football, fastest and easiest way to get there. Check out the premium content tab. For $9.99, you get access to all of our premium notebooks. You can read online about them. You can reach out to me, but you get all 3 notebooks for $9.99. A lot more coming in all of those notebooks, too, over the next couple of months. If not that, please, wherever you listen to the website, rate, review, subscribe. If you're checking us out on YouTube, just hit that subscribe and like button to help us out there as well, as we continue to at least offer our podcasts on the YouTube platform as well for people who spend more time on that than on podcast apps. So, on behalf of our sound tech engineer, David Nakano, and myself, thank you for joining us, and we look forward next time taking you from Saturday to Sunday.